Gen Z women are leaving the church. I've got my take on why. Also, robot wombs, what is happening in the world of reproductive technology, and an update on the very consequential Wisconsin election this week. We've got all this and more on today's episode of Relatable. Hey guys, welcome to Relatable. Happy Wednesday. Hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far. We had an interview scheduled for today with one of your favorite guests, one of my favorite guests, Justin Haskins, to give us an update on the Great Reset and if Trump and the policies that he's implementing are doing anything to deter those who are in charge at places like the World Economic Forum from implementing their plans via that previously obscure law in the EU. Go back and listen or watch that conversation if you haven't already. We'll get him back, though. Be praying for him. He is sick. He suddenly got sick, and so he wasn't able to come on the show today. And so pray for a full recovery for him. And so instead, we will go through some of the subjects that we've been hoping to talk about. First, we'll hit politics, and this is an update on a Wisconsin race that our eyes have been on, a very consequential race. Elon Musk, Donald Trump have been sounding the alarm about the importance of this. Elon Musk put a lot of money into this race, and unfortunately, it did not go our way. So here's a summary. It's from Daily Wire and CNN. Yesterday, the race for a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court drew national attention, along with a record $90 million in spending, as liberal Judge Susan Crawford defeated conservative Brad Schimel. While liberals saw this as a key victory over the candidate supported by President Trump and Elon Musk, Wisconsin voters also overwhelmingly voted in favor of a voter ID constitutional amendment, which was a win for Republicans. I would say it's a huge win for Republicans. Supreme Court judge races are officially nonpartisan. They're not allowed to say, hey, I'm a Democrat running for office, I'm a Republican running for office. But of course, they have their positions. You can see this through their judicial record. And so Democrats are going to support one candidate while Republicans will support another. Crawford was backed by the Democrats. Schimel, former Republican Attorney General of Wisconsin, was backed by Republicans, including Trump. So it was a fairly close race. I mean, maybe you could say not really. I mean, we've seen a lot closer. Crawford won 55% support. This also occurred in a state which Trump won in November by a narrow margin, but he still won. Remember, Biden won Wisconsin in 2020. Trump won Wisconsin in 2016. So it is a true swing state. It's hard to determine how these elections are going to go. Schimel's campaign, the Republican-backed candidate, received funds from, as I said, Elon Musk and his PAC, the America PAC. At a town hall in Wisconsin on Sunday evening, Musk gave out $1 million each to two people who signed a petition from his PAC opposing activist judges. These activist judges go beyond their jurisdiction to try to stop the Trump administration from doing what the executive branch has been charged to do, especially when it comes to deportation and other immigration policy. The PAC also gave any registered voter who signed the petition $100. And if you're saying, I can't believe that Republicans are paying people to vote, what do you think the entire Democrat Party apparatus is? That is what they are doing. They say, if you vote for us, we will give you more taxpayer dollars. Crawford was supported by billionaires George Soros and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. And so that tells you exactly who this person is. George Soros is deeply invested in the dissolution of the United States. And I wish that were an exaggeration. But speaking of Justin Haskins and the Great Reset, if you go back and you listen to all of the episodes I've done with him, go back to the first time I had Justin Haskins on. That is still one of my most popular episodes that I have ever done because of what Justin, through his just profound research, has discovered about George Soros, what he is actually funding, what is driving him, and the results of the policies and the politicians that George Soros has put in place. It is not a hyperbole to say that George Soros wants to dissolve the borders of the United States, to completely do away with our national sovereignty, to do away with law and order, and completely create a chaotic state that weakens America so that we are no longer the main inhibition of the Great Reset that is being launched by him and by others at Davos. Again, I wish that were some kind of conspiracy theory, but it's absolutely not. Also, much of the far left immigration policy that has foisted multiculturalism that has created a lot of chaos in the United States, a lot of that comes from George Soros and his Open Society Foundation. So if any politician is being funded by Soros, you know that they are pro-crime under the guise of social justice, and you know they are pro-chaos. That's the result. That's the result of Soros-backed policies and politicians. The previous funding record was $40 million set 2 years ago when liberals flipped a vacant seat, giving them the majority on the state Supreme Court for the first time in 15 years. Since the liberals won that 4-3 majority in 2023, the court has delivered major victories to Democrats. So we're talking about Wisconsin specifically. So what does this mean? I'll get into that in just a second. Let me pause and tell you about our first sponsor for the day first. That's 7 Weeks Coffee. Love 7 Weeks Coffee. I need coffee. I look forward to coffee every morning, and I love that 7 Weeks Coffee is clean, it's mold-free, it's pesticide-free, totally organic, and tastes really good. But the best part is every purchase of 7 Weeks Coffee helps fund the pro-life organizations across the country that are helping save baby lives by serving their moms and dads. 10% specifically of every sale goes to these pro-life organizations. They have raised over $800,000 for these pregnancy centers. Their name is 7 Weeks Coffee because at 7 weeks gestation, that baby inside the womb is the size of a coffee bean. Yet we know no matter the size or location of a human being, they are a person made in God's image, and therefore they have dignity and they deserve our support and they deserve the right to life. And 7 Weeks Coffee is helping ensure that they do live and that mothers can choose life. Right now during Lent, if you subscribe to 7 Weeks Coffee, you get a free 2-pack of their new single-serve brew bags to take your coffee wherever life takes you. Go to 7weekscoffee.com. You'll save 15% when you subscribe. And if you use my code Allie, you save an extra 10%. That's 7weekscoffee.com, code Allie. Okay, so here's what this means. The Wisconsin Supreme Court's ideological balance is significant because it will hear major cases on things like abortion, collective bargaining rights, voting rights, potentially congressional redistricting, all of which could impact Republican interests in Wisconsin, a key battleground state, and obviously could affect what goes on in D.C. as well. The Wisconsin state government is now divided. So we've got the governor who is a Democrat, Republicans control the state legislature, and now the Supreme Court is predominantly liberal. Per CNN, quote, with the divided government, the Supreme Court has become the final arbiter on policies that affect Wisconsinites' lives. Crawford, again, not surprising, just knowing who supports this person, has a history of liberal advocacy as an attorney before becoming a judge, which will affect a lot of the issues at stake. Crawford worked as a lawyer for Planned Parenthood. She also sued to block the state's voter ID laws and filed a lawsuit against the state's measure to reform government unions. Okay, anyone who is against voter ID laws is pro-corruption. That is the only reason you would be against that very obvious and simple restriction when it comes to who can vote. Of course, you must be a citizen of the United States and you should have to prove that. It's pretty simple. I can think of a lot more restrictions that I would put in place so that we can actually have like an educated electorate who has a stake in the future of our country. But basic, yeah, everywhere should have a voter ID law, and it is not a coincidence that it is exclusively Democrats and Democrat-run areas that don't want those voter ID laws. Obviously, she is pro-choice. When it comes to Wisconsin abortion law, they've got a trigger law. They're currently deciding on the Wisconsin Supreme Court the fate of this trigger law. This is an 1849 abortion law that took effect following the Dobbs decision in 2022, making it a felony to perform an abortion at any stage of pregnancy unless it's done to save a mother's life. This briefly stopped abortion services in Wisconsin until a judge ruled in 2023 that the law only applies to killing an unborn child without the mother's consent, which is just insane. Like, why would murder be okay just because the mother of the person being murdered says, yeah, do it? This ruling was appealed up to the state Supreme Court, which heard oral arguments last November. So now we know which direction this is going to go. Planned Parenthood filed a lawsuit in February 2024 asking the court to rule whether a constitutional right to abortion exists in the state. And obviously, Planned Parenthood and all of the pro-baby murder people want this to be a constitutional right to be able to slaughter, to dismember, to poison children because they are inside the womb and because they don't have any political capital and they have no way of defending themselves. And so Wisconsin pro-lifers, I mean, they've been working really hard so far. They will continue to have their work cut out for them. And we know that no matter which direction the court goes, even though we can predict that pretty well, that does not mean that our work is over. I really encourage you right now to support pro-life pregnancy centers in Wisconsin in particular, and you can look those up online and just know that we are supporting you, praying for you. If you are in Wisconsin, you are in the pro-life world there, let me know, let us know what we can do specifically to help you. A liberal majority on the court could also lead. We mentioned that this could affect what happens in D.C. as well. So it could lead to redrawn maps that are more favorable to Democrats, districting maps, potentially shifting the balance of power in the state legislature and Wisconsin's congressional delegation. This could impact the U.S. House majority, where Republicans hold a slim majority right now. So this election was really big, really consequential, and it did not go Republicans' way, which is not good. Now, the good news, voter ID law passed. So in true swing state, purple state fashion, voted for the Democrat, voted also for this Republican-backed voter ID law. Wisconsin voters approved a state constitutional amendment to enshrine existing voter ID requirements into the Wisconsin Constitution. Wisconsin has had voter ID laws in place since 2011, so that just requires voters to present an acceptable form of photo ID. However, since it was a state law, it was vulnerable to legal challenges or legislative appeal. Now, as a constitutional amendment, it would require another voter-approved amendment to repeal, which is exactly what the left wants to do when it comes to abortion. Just a reminder, the two sides are not the same. I know you've got people who believe, well, we're not supposed to be on either side. Both sides have their bad things. Okay, well, here in the state of Wisconsin are what the two sides are voting on or supporting right now. You've got the Republican side, which is saying we want it to be a constitutional amendment that says you have to be an American citizen and be able to prove it to vote because we care about the integrity of our elections. We don't want to be vulnerable to corruption or cheating. And we think that national sovereignty and citizenship should actually mean something, or else none of this really matters. We're not even really a country. The other side, what they want enshrined in the Constitution, what they want regarded as a constitutional right, so that it's extremely hard to get rid of, is the right to murder an unborn child, a living human being without any defense. That's what they want in the Constitution. The two sides are not the same, okay? Whatever you hear about Donald Trump or Republicans being cruel because they're deporting fentanyl traffickers and murderers and illegal people, to their home countries, just remember that the other side believes in the unfettered and celebrated right to poison and dismember living babies inside the womb and even outside of the womb. And I don't even have to go into the details on that if you have been listening to the show for any amount of time. If you would like citations, proof, evidence, a detailed account of the claim that I just made, just type in relatable abortion wherever you listen or watch, and we have tons and tons and tons of episodes on the specific policies that Democrats have supported that support outright infanticide. So all of this proves yet again the alliteration that we have been using for over 5 years. Politics matter because policy matters because people matter. Politics affects policy. Policy affects people. People matter. People matter to God, and therefore they matter to us as Christians. As you heard Natasha and I talk about on Monday, we do not have the option as salt and light in this world to remove ourselves or recuse ourselves from the political world, the public sphere. Because if we believe that God's ways are better and if we love our neighbor, then we will do everything we can to advocate for God's definitions of goodness, righteousness, truth, and justice so our neighbors get to benefit from those good things. And so we've got another example of that right here in these Wisconsin elections. All right. Move on to the next story. Let me pause, tell you about our next sponsor for the day, and that is Good Ranchers. Love Good Ranchers. We eat Good Ranchers almost every night. Let's see. Last night, what did we eat in the Stuckey home? They have fajita chicken, which I really appreciate because it's not completely shredded, but you know, the kind of chicken that you have like on a taco or on a fajita, they already have that pre-cut. And I put it in a skillet and I cooked it. And then later I added some fresh cut peppers, later added some tomato. I used some mild taco seasoning, some olive oil, mixed that all together, had that over rice with some avocado. It was really good. And those are the kind of meals that I like to make that are super simple with my Good Ranchers meat. And that's why I love their non-pre-marinated chicken breasts as well. You can do so much with that. We bake chicken breasts every week and we mix it up and change it up to make it fun. Their ground beef is awesome, can be used for so much, all different cuts of steak. That's why I recommend specifically my Allie, Beth, Stuckey custom Good Ranchers box, because you have all of those basics that work as really good, just like protein-packed building blocks for good meals for your family. And I love that all of this meat comes from American farms and ranches exclusively. It just takes a load off my mind too that I get this box of meat showing up at my front door every month on dry ice. I just don't even have to think about it. And it just is such peace of mind having a freezer full of this American high quality meat. Go to goodranchers.com. They've got a spring into action deal right now. Subscribe to any box. You get free bacon, ground beef, chicken nuggets, seed oil free chicken nuggets, or salmon in every box for a year, plus $40 off with my code Allie. Goodranchers.com, code Allie. All right. So this post has gone viral on X, and this is not a new conversation, but the discussion has renewed around this. And this is a hypothetical scenario. As far as we know, this is not actually happening right now. Although I keep seeing this over and over, this suggestion that we are on the brink of being able to create children in some kind of incubator or in a robot, and that we don't actually need human wombs. We don't actually need women to create or to gestate at least these babies. So this post went viral. This person with a picture of a robot carrying a baby. Of course, it's not real, but this depiction of it, robot carrying a baby. Or actually, I think it's supposed to be a real woman with just like an artificial womb, robot womb. Okay. This person says once they successfully make this robot that can give birth, it's over for you, ladies. And then this post really went viral. And this is kind of what hit it off. And I think this is even more interesting to talk about. This person, this has 600,000 likes on X. They don't understand that this is literally a win for women. And then you have several other posts echoing that sentiment. Someone says, thank God. Another person says, amen. And then another person says, and these all have a lot of engagement, women's bodies will no longer be exploited for their reproductive capacities is quite literally a feminist dream. So you see that the feminist dream, the feminist idea is that a woman's body is actually oppressive to us, that our amazing capability to create, bear, and then sustain life is actually a form of oppression that women need to be liberated from via this kind of dystopian technology. So this is from an article via MIT Technology Review 2023, and it's about robots fertilizing eggs in IVF. So a little bit different, but in the same vein. 2 baby girls were born in early 2023 via IVF, but instead of traditional IVF, they were fertilized by a robot. These are engineers in Barcelona working for some startup company. One of the engineers, with no real experience in fertility medicine, used a Sony PlayStation 5 controller to position a robotic needle, eyeing a human egg through a camera. It then moved forward on its own, penetrating the egg and dropping off a single sperm cell. Even though over a dozen embryos were fertilized by the robot, only 2 healthy embryos were implanted and later born. The goal of automating IVF is to make a lot more babies. Full automation of IVF is still a long way off, as IVF involves over a dozen procedures and the sperm injecting robot only partially performs one of them. There is some evidence to suggest that fertility machines like the sperm injecting robot could eventually evolve into artificial wombs, but the technology is not there yet. Jesus, please come before this. Please, please. Like, we're all ready for it. There is a reason why so much dystopian fiction creates these scenes where the beginning of life is artificial. I mean, this is Brave New World. In Brave New World, these babies are created in pods. We don't know exactly how they're made, but they are disconnected from their biological parents. They are raised completely disconnected from their biological parents. They are not supposed to have the same emotional response to things as typical humans do because they were created for a particular purpose, to do a certain kind of job. They don't have the same ideas about sex and about connection and about marriage. They are basically automated people that are meant to do certain tasks. And when they go outside of that, disaster happens. Brave New World is very applicable, maybe even more applicable than 1984. But if you haven't read both of those, I really encourage you to, because there are a lot of lessons to be learned. But we're not supposed to be mimicking dystopian fiction. We are supposed to be learning from it and running away from it, because they're a critique on where society could go if we keep heading in the direction that we are heading. And it is a misunderstanding and mistreatment of human dignity and the human experience and human purpose. You see that when we play God in this way and when humans intervene, there will be consequences. Not only consequences on the individuals that are without their consent being treated as a science experiment, in this case babies, but also on society in general. It's so interesting how the people who say that they are pro-science never stop to ask themselves, what does science tell us about the way things should be? What does the natural science of reproduction tell us about what is actually needed for a child? What is actually good for a woman? What is actually good for a man? They will listen to science when it comes to, or quote unquote science, when it comes to the vaccine, or quote unquote science when it comes to climate change. But when it comes to reproduction, they won't stop and say, you have to have a man, you have to have a woman, they have to come together to create this child. And maybe that's because a man and a woman are also necessary to raise the child. Women have this amazing capacity to ovulate and to create life and then sustain life with her own body after she pushes a baby out of her womb. Maybe that says something about the female purpose and the beauty and the uniqueness of the feminine experience that we don't need to be liberated from, but that we should actually be understanding and elevating more. What do we always say? Children are always the unconsenting subjects of progressive social experiments. What we know about children, babies inside the womb, is they create this very special and somewhat mysterious bond between the woman that makes them or that is carrying them and their own body and their own mind. Just in an emotional sense, their smell, their feel, their hearing of a woman's heartbeat creates a home for them that regulates their own emotions, their own breathing, their own heart rate after they're born and they're placed back on that mother's chest. But we also know, we've talked about this study before, that there is actually a transferring of cells that happens when a woman is pregnant, that a baby's body can actually help a woman's body heal when she needs to be healed. If she has a heart problem, if she has an immune deficiency, actually pregnancy and the healing mechanisms in the baby's growing body can help the mother as well. And it's amazing because even if a woman has an abortion, even if a woman has a miscarriage, even if a woman is a surrogate, that exchanging of cells still happens. And that baby is a part of the woman who carried him, ideally his mom, forever. Isn't that incredible? It's almost like there was an intelligent designer that created this system for our good. And when we mess with it, whether it's through IVF, whether it's through artificial wombs, there's going to be a loss. There's going to be a consequence. We have no idea what we are doing to a child's psychology, to their physiology, to their emotional health, to all of that when we take them away from the mother who carried them, when we take them out of the ideal situation in which they are to grow. And so, no, not all progress is good. Remember, technology can tell us what can be done. It cannot tell us what should be done. And when technology, we have a lot of phrases on the show, if you didn't know. When technology takes us from what is natural to what is possible, Christians have to ask, but is this moral and is this biblical? And in this case, no, it's not. And also, like, you are just asking for trouble. I mean, we already have the problem of surrogacy being used to enable and exacerbate child sex trafficking on a scale that is like beyond human comprehension, as we have talked about so many times. I mean, when you really completely remove a child from the protection of the womb, from the protection of the mother, when you have the ability, when someone has the ability to take the child out of this artificial womb whenever they want to destroy the baby when they decide they don't want it anymore, I mean, you are just tearing down any barriers we have now to abortion and infanticide. I mean, there is no good that can come from this. No good that can come from this, especially when we already have a million embryos on ice that could be adopted, especially when we have millions of children in foster care and through adoption agencies who need to be taken care of. There's nothing good that can come out of this. There's no positive side of this. And it is just a part of this world of eugenics. It is part of this world of reproductive technology that garners a lot of profit for a lot of people, but should unapologetically and unwaveringly be opposed by Christians. And there's another aspect of this that is actually being covered by the New York Times, so not just a viral X post, but is something that is actually going mainstream that we need to discuss as well. And I'll talk about that in a second. Let me pause and tell you about our next sponsor first. And that is Carly Jean Los Angeles. I'm wearing my shacket from CJLA right now. And you guys know how much I love CJLA, have been wearing their clothes for so long. I was just cycling out some of my fall clothes, bringing in my spring and summer clothes into my closet. And I was taking out some of my CJLA clothes that I have literally had for probably 5 years, that I've worn during pregnancies, while postpartum, and I'm still excited to wear them now. That is like the beauty of the trademark style of CJLA. It's classic. It's not dependent upon trends, but you are always going to look on trend. And that's what I love about them. Also, really high quality. A lot of clothes these days, even the expensive kind, just don't last very long. That's not true of CJLA stuff. Plus, their basics line is all made in the US, so that's even more amazing quality. Plus, it's a Christian family-owned company that's trying to glorify the Lord in everything they do, and they just make amazing products. So it's a win all around when you shop at Carly Jean Los Angeles. Go to carlyjeanlosangeles.com. Use code AllieB for 20% off your first order. carlyjeanlosangeles.com, code AllieB. So the New York Times had a story just this week, and the cover of the story, this is by Ezra Klein, I believe. This baby was carefully selected as an embryo, and you see this cute little baby crawling, and the little caption with an arrow to the baby: her mother screened for gender and health during IVF. This almost feels like an April Fool's joke, that this is an advertisement, a marketing strategy that we're supposed to be applauding. See, this is a perfect example of toxic empathy. What does toxic empathy do? It lifts up one person that you are supposed to have compassion and sympathy for and ignores everyone else on the other side of the moral equation. So they're showing you this cute baby because who can deny a cute baby? Who could look at that baby and say, you should not exist, and we're supposed to ignore all of these baby siblings who were thrown away like trash? Toxic empathy evokes feelings for one person on one side of the issue while making you ignore everyone else on the other side of the moral equation. And toxic empathy makes you feel so much so that you are blinded to both reality and morality. And that is true in all reproductive conversations that we have, especially when it comes to IVF. We hear about the very sad parents who want to be a mom and dad. We understand that. We have sympathy and even empathy for that, and we can and should. But the feelings that we have for their plight should not blind us to the reality that the IVF industry kills more babies every year than the abortion industry. That if a baby is really a baby at conception, if we believe that life starts at conception as we do when we're talking about abortion, then how we treat embryos matters, not just in a womb, but also in a lab. And in IVF, those embryos, the vast majority of the time, are being graded, are being discarded. If they don't have a high grade, they typically don't survive the transfer process, which is extremely risky. And that is the moral bargain that you are taking, the ethical risk that you are taking every time you embark on IVF. Not every couple goes through that process, but the vast majority do, and most doctors won't tell you about it. But that's just the basic risk with IVF. Now we're adding something else on that through this story that is promoting a technology that grades embryos for all of the genetic unwanted traits that a baby might have, so that parents can say, oh yeah, that embryo right there has Down syndrome. That embryo right there might have some kind of disease that my grandmother had. Discard those and only allow the babies who are quote unquote perfect to survive. So this person, her name is Noor Siddiqui. She is the founder of Orchid, a reproductive technology company based in San Francisco that offers advanced genetic screening for embryos during IVF. That's who's highlighted in this New York Times article. And here's what she says in response to this article about her company. When I was in elementary school, my mom started going blind. Retinitis pigmentosa, no family history, no treatments, no cure. I got lucky. She didn't. It led me to build Orchid Inc. So my baby and everyone else's gets to win the genetic lottery, avoid blindness, and hundreds of severe genetic diseases. Today, the New York Times covered the tech we've spent years building, whole genome embryo screening for hundreds of diseases, not in theory, not in mice, in humans, in IVF centers. So, she's admitting, yeah, we are testing humans and we are throwing away, she doesn't say this, but you have to read between lines, we are throwing away the ones that don't make the cut. She goes on to say, if you could prevent your child from going blind, would you? From getting pediatric cancer at 5, from heart defects, schizophrenia at 22, from living a life radically altered by pure genetic bad luck? This is a choice parents are now able to make. She also goes on to say, sex is for fun. IVF is for making babies. Golly, what an insane and disjointed and disordered view of life and children and creation. Oh my goodness. What this is you are asking these lives that you have intentionally created, these embryos that are living human beings with their own distinct DNA, their eye color, their gender already determined, obviously some of their diseases, future diseases already determined. You are asking them to sacrifice their lives in accordance to your wants. That is disordered. Parents sacrifice for their kids. We do not ask the lives that we have created to sacrifice their safety, their well-being, their rights, their life for us. That we see that ordering from the very beginning. That God created the family, man, woman, children in marriage for the protection of all of the parties, but especially the most vulnerable party, the child. Again, it's like God knew what he was doing when he was creating biology and created society and families based on that biology. Here's the irony here as she is promoting this, that yes, you get to choose your baby's sex, eye color, screen for a range of genetic traits that already happens. But she is saying that this is even more than that you can test in a way that can look for all kinds of future diseases. As she said, you might be able to prevent your child from getting cancer at age 5. Here's the thing. Here's how we have to think about this as Christians. If we know life starts at conception, we can read that in Psalm 139, God is knitting us together in our mother's womb. We know that even beyond the Bible, just science, that human life starts at fertilization. That little human being has his or her own DNA at that point. Human beings are people with dignity. That's the philosophical, ideological debate that people have. Well, when does a human actually become a person? When do they actually have a soul? No, the morally safest place to say that a human is a person is at the point of conception, because any point after that becomes very arbitrary. Is it based on size? Is it based on age? Is it based on location? Is it based on sentience? Is it based on its ability to help itself? Okay, well, if you do that, then you have to apply all of those factors to people outside of the womb, and you see how that gets really tricky. So the question here is, if you can prevent your 5-year-old from getting cancer by killing her when she is just an embryo, is it okay to do that when she is 2 weeks old? Is it okay to do that when she's 1? If the goal here is to prevent all suffering and to prevent all disease, then why is it unethical to kill a child outside of the womb to prevent those things? Because an embryo doesn't look the exact same way that a newborn does, because an embryo isn't the same age as a newborn is. Well, all of those are very slippery reasons to justify eugenics. And that's what this is. This is Margaret Sanger's dream. From the very beginning, she wanted to sterilize and inflict infanticide on those that she considered less than, including Black Americans. That was part of her Negro Project. She's the founder of Planned Parenthood. And if you read my book, Toxic Empathy, the chapter about abortion goes through the history of how abortion the industry was founded, how Planned Parenthood was founded. It was all founded by eugenicists, people who believed that some people just did not deserve the chance to live, and that maybe we can create a pure race of people without any defects. That's exactly what this is too. It is couched in compassion. It is couched in trying to alleviate harm, but really what you are doing to alleviate harm is killing people. You're killing human beings. And understand this is what the IVF industry is and does. So when President Trump signs an executive order saying that he is going to endeavor to make IVF more accessible and to force our tax dollars into funding it, this is part of what he is talking about. And I just have less and less patience for Christians who are unwilling to think through issues like this, who, because they went through IVF themselves or they know someone who went through IVF, they won't touch it. And yet they will at the same time say that they're pro-life, say that a life is a life no matter how small. We should care for the most vulnerable. Yes, we're going to fight for life inside the womb. What about the life inside the lab? They matter too. If they are human beings, they also have the most fundamental human right, which is the right to life. And the argument is, well, if you're pro-life, why would you be against this? Why would you be against IVF? Why would you be against surrogacy and the creation of babies? Look, to be pro-life means that I do not believe in purposely ending the life of a person that has been created. That does not mean that I am for every form of conception. Just because I believe that a baby conceived in rape should not be aborted doesn't mean that I supported the rape, right? Like, we can understand that just because you are pro-life does not mean that we are pro every form of conception. And it is because we believe in the value and the dignity of those babies that we do not support every form of conception and gestation. We believe that science has to tell us something about how things should be. I'm talking about natural biology. That when we intervene, bad things tend to happen, like the creation of millions of embryos that are completely abandoned or surrendered to science or are destroyed or eugenically discarded on a daily basis in the United States. We are the Wild West of reproductive technology. This story just proves that, just proves that America is in a very bad way when it comes to this, and it's all being done in the name of helping people have babies. The irony is also, if this person's grandmother had had the technology that she developed, this person would not be here. Because if this person's grandmother could have seen that her daughter, the embryo, would eventually have blindness and then would have discarded that embryo, not only would she not be here, but this person, Noor Siddiqui, wouldn't be here either. But I bet you she believes that her life has value, that she has contributed to society despite her mom having this degenerative disease. I bet she loves her mom and glad that she's here, and I bet she's grateful for her life. She just doesn't think that other people should be able to have the same opportunity to live that she and her mom did. Siddiqui also said that she envisions a world where embryo screening becomes the norm, telling investors, again, I said this earlier, sex is for fun and embryo screening is for babies, a provocative stance that's already sparking debate. No, sex is for reproduction, and it also is fun. Like, it's great. God gave us the gift of sex. It should be fun, should be enjoyed exclusively between one man and one woman in the context of marriage. It is great. And what a gift that it is also like this fun thing that creates life and makes the world go round and spawns generations. Genetic testing is for eugenicists. Eugenics is for Nazis. Okay? Like, let's leave that in our past. We all say never again, but we don't apply all of the principles and all the practices of the Holocaust to that statement, apparently. Because part of what they believed in, too, was a pure race where all of the less thans could be discarded. These less thans just happen to be embryos in a lab. And yes, the comparison works because, again, if you go back to the beginning of all of this with Margaret Sanger. You'll see that she was very good friends with the Nazis as they shared the same goal. It's not so different than what's happening today, okay? Get smart on this. There's one resource in addition to the many, many conversations I've had about this on the show. Again, you can type in IVF relatable, and I encourage you to get educated on this. In my Love is Love, which is a myth, but in that chapter of the book of Toxic Empathy, we go through IVF and surrogacy and give you some like quick talking points and facts on that, so you can watch that. But also, I encourage you to get Ethics for a Brave New World. It has all of these different subjects and talks about them from a biblical perspective and helps you really think through these ethical issues in a very productive way. So I recommend that book to you. All right. We'll have a quick conversation about the story that I've been meaning to get to, and that is a new Barna study saying that Gen Z women are leaving the church. I'll give you my assessment on why, but let me pause and tell you about our last sponsor for the day, and that is Jase Medical. Okay, let's talk about emergency preparedness. We don't know what's going to happen with the supply chain, natural disasters, all kinds of things that could happen that could prevent you from being able to get the medication that you need, whether it's life-saving antibiotics, whether it's something like ivermectin or an EpiPen or Tamiflu. You want to be able to have these things on hand. So get a Jase case. When you go through their confidential telemedicine process, they'll get you all the medication that you need. It's just better to be safe than sorry. All of these things could literally save your life. And if you're in a difficult situation where you can't get them at the pharmacy through the traditional means. They also have a Jase Go case that they're giving away right now. If you go to jase.com, you can enter their giveaway. It's just a travel Jase case. And they have a Jase Daily case. Through their telemedicine process, they can get you a year-long supply of the prescriptions that you and your family rely on. Again, just a great way to be prepared. Don't want to get in a situation where you can't get to the pharmacy and you need pills that may be life-saving for you or that are just absolutely necessary for your health. So go to jase.com, use code Allie at checkout for a discount. That's jase.com, code Allie. Okay. Gen Z women are leaving the church. This is according to a Barna study. Barna is really like the gold standard in Christian studies like this. They showed that Gen Z women ages 18 to 24 are less likely to identify with faith than their male counterparts, marking a significant change from previous generations where women have historically been the more religious sex. From Barna Study on Gen Z, Volume 3, females between the ages of 18 to 24 are more likely to say they don't believe in God or a higher power. The New York Times, I believe it was, also covered this too, that there is a rise of the religious right among Gen Z men, whereas Gen Z women are becoming more progressive. For decades, women led the way in levels of religious engagement, church attendance, and faith identity. This could indicate a broader shift of women out of the church and a less devout emerging generation of women. They break down Gen Z into two groups: teen Gen Z, ages 13 to 17, and young adult Gen Z. Like, nothing makes me feel older than to think about how young other adults are. Like, that's just an aside. Like, we have a babysitter who is 20. Okay, this is crazy. Bree, are you ready to feel old too? Okay, babysitter who is 20. And we were talking about Frozen. And my daughter asked her if she watched Frozen when she was a kid. And I'm like, well, no, she didn't watch Frozen when she was a kid. Yes, she did. She did. Did you know? I think that Frozen came out in 2010. You can fact check me on that. It's not 2010? Okay, someone fact check me on that. I thought it was later too, but then I thought that I read that it was
2013.
Okay, 2013. Okay, so how many years ago was that? 12 years ago, she was 8. Yes, that is the perfect age to watch Frozen. So she watched that when she was a kid, and my kids are watching it like it's brand new. Every little girl that I know watches Frozen, loves Frozen like it is brand new. No, it came out when the babysitter of my children, who is an adult, was a child. That's crazy. That's
That
crazy.
does make me feel old.
Yes. And like I was an adult when she was still a child, and I just feel like I am still 25.
I remember watching it in college. So
Yeah.
I don't love that.
Yeah. I was like right out of college I think I watched it with my husband's now they're our niece and nephew, but we were dating, and I'm pretty sure that like we went over to their house and watched Frozen for the first time. That would have been like 2014. But anyway, yeah, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. So anyway, we're talking about Gen Z. When we're talking about 13-year-olds, we are talking about people who were born in 2012. Okay? There are people walking around who can walk and talk who were born in 2012. And that is very frightening to me. Anyway, these people also apparently have religious opinions. They're old enough to have religious opinions. So female young adults, 18 to 24, are significantly more likely than female teens to strongly agree that morals change over time based on society. Female young adults, 18 to 24, are also most likely to identify as religious nuns, NONES. This is compared to 32% of male young adults, 28% of female teens, and 22% of males. So yes, it was the New York Times who noticed the trend a few months ago in their article, "In a First, young men are more religious than women." Okay. So why is this? I'm sure a lot of you out there have your own thoughts about this. Like I will just give I think there are a lot of reasons for it, by the way. I don't think that there's just one reason. I think social media plays a part in it. I think just progressive ideology. I think toxic empathy is actually like a huge part of the tool that has been used to emotionally manipulate naturally compassionate and well-intentioned young women into believing that in order to be a good person and a kind person, you have to be progressive. So every young woman in your life should read both You're Not Enough. I'd start with You're Not Enough, actually. And then I would move to toxic empathy. That would be my recommendation. Obviously, I would rather them more than anything that I've ever written. I would rather them just get an ESV study Bible and imbibe that first and foremost. But these books are also like, if they don't read the Bible, it could be like a good precursor to that. Anyway, one of the things, in addition to the many other factors I think are at play here. And I hate the whole, let's blame the church for society's problems, because I'm not really that person. And I think people sin because people have been sinning, and sin is attractive and the flesh is very strong. And most people don't have the desire or the incentive to buck against the popular narrative. Most people have a very low tolerance for exclusion and marginalization and ostracization. And so most people are just going to go along to get along, and whatever, the media says about something, they're just going to say, yes, I believe that too, because I want you to like me, especially women. We especially want to be liked and accepted. But I do think that the church plays a role in this. And this is something I've been talking about for a long time, that I probably actually started talking and writing about in college, and have discussed a lot on this show. And that's actually why I wrote You're Not Enough, because I noticed not only in popular secular culture do we have these kind of like amateur psychologists, author influencers who are constantly preaching to women that you are enough, that you're perfect the way you are, that you are entitled to everything you want, and that your journey in life should lead you to loving yourself perfectly. And once you do that, everything else will fall into place. You've got this inner goddess deep inside that has been held back by society's standards and unfair marketing trends and arbitrary standards of beauty and capitalism and the patriarchy. And once you throw all of that off and you find and manifest that inner goddess, then you will be perfectly happy. I mean, that is basically the underlying plot to most teen fiction. And that's also directly what we are being told by so many influencers. But what I really noticed and what really disturbed me is that we saw an echo of that in women's ministries, in so many women's books. If you walk into so many, I can't say most because I don't know the statistics on it, so many women's conferences, the main goal is to make the attendees there feel seen, feel applauded, feel appreciated, feel beautiful, feel wanted. And the implicit message there is that that's really women's biggest problem, is low self-esteem, that we're undervalued, and that the biggest issue that needs to be solved for us is feeling good about ourselves. And if we have that, if we know how amazing we are and how perfect we are in God's sight, then we will finally be happy and confident. And that's just not it. That's not our main problem. And that should not be the main goal. Our biggest problem is also men's biggest problem, that we are sinners in need of a savior, that we are actually dead in our sin apart from Christ, that we are tempted by sin, we are tempted by the flesh. Actually, our bigger problem is that we think way too highly of ourselves. We think way too much about ourselves. We are so self-obsessed, and sometimes that leads to unhealthy self-loathing. Sometimes that leads to unhealthy self-aggrandizement. But on both sides of that self-obsession coin, what we really need is the surrender, the self-denial, and the self-forgetfulness that comes from following Christ. And in that countercultural message, you actually find a lot of confidence and fulfillment, because you actually place a burden and a yoke on women when you tell them that their biggest problem is that they feel bad about themselves, because then they're searching inside themselves for, well, what's wrong with me? I need to understand myself more. I need to dig deeper into me. I need to go on this long journey of self-discovery. Why am I not going to therapy? I need to start going to therapy. Hang on, wait, what's my Enneagram number? Oh, I forgot that I might have a wing. Maybe I'm not really a 1. Maybe I'm a 1 wing 2. And oh my gosh, all this time I've misunderstood myself. And now I just got to figure it out. I got to figure out who I really am. And that might sound like you're going on this liberating journey, but really it's this exhausting journey, because you realize when you dig deep enough that there's a whole lot of ugliness in there. And the only person that can redeem you of that and heal you of all of that is Jesus Christ. Because the self can't be both the problem and the solution. If inside yourself you are finding these very real feelings of inadequacy and depression and anxiety, you will not find the solution to these things in the same place that you are finding your problems. You could only find the solution outside of yourself, namely in the God who created you. He alone can tell you who you are, whose you are, and what you are worth. And he tells you that by sending his son to die for you. And so instead of looking to yourself to figure out who you are and what you're worth, you get to look to the cross. Because what you feel about yourself will change depending on how you feel on any given day. And that depends on how much you slept last night and what you ate for breakfast this morning and what people are saying about you. But if you look to the cross, if you look to Jesus, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, you are relieved of that burden of being your own source of satisfaction. So I just wonder if actually the church, if women's ministries and women's Bible studies have been focused on the wrong things and have actually promoted self-idolatry. And look, if you are just promoting a Christianized version of what the world is offering, you can't be surprised when women don't want to sacrifice their Sunday morning to go to church and instead just want to go to brunch. Because they can be told how awesome and beautiful they are by their friends without all of their religiosity that comes with attending a worship service. And so I just wonder if churches have underestimated that women need theology too, that women need apologetics too, women need the unvarnished gospel too, that we needed something more substantive, that we needed difficult truths. We didn't need to just be fed a Jesus version of self-help nonsense. I wonder if that's part of all of this. It's also a big inspiration for Share the Arrows. That's why I started Share the Arrows. That's why we had the conference last year. That's why we've got it this year, because I believe that women, as image bearers of God, as people who need Christ, as people who are bearing Christ and who are vessels of the gospel, that we need training, that we can take difficult truth that we need deep theology, that we need apologetics, and that we can disciple our children in what is true in an adversarial culture. And that's why we're having Share the Arrows this year. I really encourage you to join us. You will be bolstered. You will be strengthened. I love the message I got last year from an attendee. I walked out of there with zero fear of man. Yes and amen. Let's go. That's what's going to happen at Share the Arrows this year. So make sure that you go to sharethearrows.com, get your tickets. We've got new speakers in addition to the ones that we've already announced that will be announced very soon. Sharethearrows.com. All right. That's all we've got for today. I will see you back here tomorrow.